Hey everyone, today I want to talk about some new NSD spinner products, specifically the NSD Metallic Dynamics spinner, as well as the NSD Power Cycle, which is like a two-handed gyroscopic spinner. Now, if you've never seen one of these before, the original model looks a little bit like this, which is a plastic gyroscopic ball that spins in the middle and you can get it going. It's kind of a hand, wrist, grip, arm exercising device. And this particular one has a little analog or a digital, not backlit counter on the top to keep tracks of things like how many RPMs you're spinning it at and so forth. Now, full disclosure, I've really enjoyed working with NSD Spinner in the past. They've actually provided me these two products for free because they wanted me to make a little video about what I thought of them. And to be completely honest, there are some things that I really like about these and some things that I don't really like, and areas where I think they could be improved. So let me talk about both of these devices, starting with the NSD Metallic Spinner Dynamics. Now, why do they call this the Dynamics model? I don't know. But what you'll notice is it's quite a bit bigger than the original plastic model. The counter on the top sticks out a lot, and very interestingly, there is no exposed rotor anymore, so there's no room to pinch yourself when you're using this device, which I really, really like. The other really cool thing is this has a rechargeable battery in the counter itself, so when you're spinning it, in theory, it stays charged up, as well as two really cool other features in this counter, namely a backlight, and when I press start, probably the coolest feature of them all, which is it automatically starts spinning via electric motor now. So it gets it spinning up to about 3,000 RPMs, which is pretty cool because you don't need a string, you don't need to worry about pinching yourself, and you can get right into spinning it beyond 3,000 RPMs, which is really, really cool. You can hold the counter in order to read it because it does spin a little bit when you're utilizing it, and you can just set it down on a table and it will automatically turn off. Really cool advantages to this device. Now, a couple interesting design choices here. Number one is they put these divots around the top half of the shell, which presumably give you a little bit more traction with your fingers, which is really nice. Now, there's pros and cons to that. I'll talk about some of the cons to that later. The other thing is there's a little USB port here on the side, which is a micro USB, which allows you to recharge the battery if for some reason it runs out fully from sitting for too long or whatever other reason this might run out when you're not spinning it. Now, interestingly enough, mine came fully discharged, so I did actually need to charge mine for a bit through the USB port before it would start spinning up and keeping power. So that's the first device. That is the Dynamics. Really interesting device. It's big, it's heavy, and importantly, I did want to show the comparison in size between the original spinner, which is, I would say, 50% larger, but also some of the other metal spinners that NSD Spinner has put out. For example, this metal spinner, which is also a heavy spinner, which was the same size as the original spinner, but it's just in heavier metal with a metal rotor, as well as the Titan, which is the previous model, which has a old style counter on the top and an exposed metal rotor. And even then, when I put these next to each other, you can see that the new Dynamics is a significantly larger size than the previous Titan. Okay, so that will come into play later when I talk about some of the cons to this device. Now, the other device I wanted to talk about was the Power Cycle. And this is an entirely new idea for a device. This thing fits kind of in the palm of my hand, but there's some similar features to the other device in that this one has the same type of counter, which has an LED backlight, is powered by the or charged by the device itself as it's spinning in theory, has a USB port on it to charge it up if you need to, and as you can hear, also has auto start. Now, what is the Power Cycle? The Power Cycle is a two-handed device which is a lot like pedaling one of those hand bikes, remember from American Gladiators? And you actually get the device accelerating this way or downwards with two hands. In order to read the counter on this one, which also moves, you hold these two buttons on the side and you're able to read the speed on the counter. So another really interesting device I like in both of these devices that NSD is innovating. They've provided some new ways to kind of have fun, exercise, compete. So that is very cool. I've enjoyed using them both. However, there are some downsides to both of these devices. I don't think any of them are huge downsides, but I'll start with the biggest ones first, which is comfort. Now, admittedly, I have weak skin and probably like little baby hands compared to some working people's hands, but I found both of these relatively uncomfortable to use. Why? Because this is big, this is heavy, and what I found was when I was getting the acceleration up, most of the torque in the way that I hold it was applied on my pinky, and it ended up hurting my pinky more than my actual grip strength. When you put your pinky up like this, you don't have enough control on the ball. You'll actually lose control of the ball. So I need the pinky here for stability, but then all of the torque goes onto my pinky and it actually ends up being really uncomfortable to spin quickly. So that's a really big downside to this device. I do love the fact that this is covered. You can't get pinched, so you can kind of grab it wherever if you like. But it's so big for my hand and it's so heavy. I would much rather have this be a similar size to the original metal device where you can actually hold it comfortably, and I don't get that same torque problem with my pinky. So I find this really uncomfortable for prolonged periods, but it does generate a lot of torque. Same thing on the power cycle. If you look at the shape of the hand grips, now these are covered with rubber bands. When you hold this, these are not really contoured to your hand. Now, granted, it needs to be symmetrical and these need to be the same all the way around, but I find the corners of each side to be relatively uncomfortable on my hand, and they kind of dig into the palm of my hand on each side when I'm holding it. So I would have liked to see these be a little bit rounder or a little bit more contoured to my hand, because the way that these are shaped, I find a little bit uncomfortable. And so between the two, I think comfort is my number one downside, and that might vary depending on you personally. I think another big downside for these is the USB ports are USB or micro USB, which is not my favorite type of port. It is a legacy standard. I really wish these had been USB type C. And then finally, I think the other big issue with these is simply the price. These are really expensive devices. So these are going to be for people who probably are already into spinners, can appreciate the bigger, heavier, more advanced movements that you have to do with these, or just want something that's really well built that auto starts. But I still think you would probably want to start with the cheap plastic model, and or if you can find one of these metal models in a smaller size, see if I can get that to focus. I would recommend one of these just purely for comfort. Now that said, I love the auto start feature. I love the backlit counters, the fact that they're recharging, and hopefully I don't have to replace the battery anytime soon. I love the fact that these are very different devices to what came before. I would just like to see this one be smaller and easier to hold with my hand, and I would like to see this one have better contours so that when I am using it, my hands feel a little bit more comfortable on the sides here. And finally, for anybody that was wondering, my record speed so far on the power cycle is 9840 RPMs, and my high speed on the dynamics is 8166. And I don't know if you can see that, but again, I do feel like the limitation, especially on this one, is my pinky and not being able to grip it all the way around with my fingers. So, NSD, thank you for sending me these really cool devices, really innovative. really wild when they're spinning by themselves. Some room for improvement, but I'm really happy you guys are making new devices. And I think you guys should check these out if you're into spinner type of products. So thanks for watching.